December 24th, 1914, a day that could have changed humanity forever. The lessons can change us. On December 24th, 1914, 5 months into the First World War, the Germans and the British on the Western Front unofficially had a ceasefire. At first, they started collecting their fallen soldiers, friends, and then they started trading rations between the Germans and the British. And then they started playing soccer. And they realized that they were human and they had lives back at home. And that the soldiers on the other side were useless idiots just like they were. If it had spread through the entire Western Front and people just said, we will not fight our enemies because they are not our enemies. Our enemies are those who make the decisions for us, who send us out to war, who do not care for you and I. Well, what happened? The high command of both the British and the German armies in the First World War started shooting at their own soldiers to go back into the trenches, to go and kill these people that they realized were human beings. We're not so different. What's actually happened is there is a power structure that wants us to think that we're different by splitting us up into teams, different cities, into colors, into sexual orientation, forgetting that we are human beings. And just like on December 24th, for Christmas Eve, the war stopped, and for a moment, a part of humanity awoke to the fact that we're not different, we're the same. We are being used. There's a lot of things happening right now, and if you're not questioning, you're asleep. I do not get angry at people who are asleep because I, for much of my life, was asleep. However, there's been so much change that does not make sense. You can't afford to sleep anymore. I was in Long Beach this week. I was blown away by seeing all those ships just waiting. See, our world is so fragile right now. So much has been outsourced. And if a supply chain breaks down, we starve. Forget just about your computers. Food, electricity. These are things that we all need. Most people don't know this. They fear China. But do you know the average calorie in China needs 85% inputs that are not from China? That means fertilizer and gas and oil to make a calorie for the average person. And that has to travel about 6,000 to 7,000 miles to arrive in China. Could you imagine if it breaks down? The starvation that would happen? I don't know if you remember this, but I'm old enough to remember that in the 50s and 60s, they had massive starvation in China. And when I didn't want to eat my food, my parents used to say to me, remember, there's people starving in China. It's not that long ago. From 1980 to about 2015, we had the perfect storm. We had just enough capital in the market by people who were older, and money was cheap because people were getting ready to retire, so they were looking for every penny, every dollar extra they could make. And you also had something called a demographic dividend happening in the world. That means there were so many people who are working and consuming, and that grew our economy. But it was a blip in human history. And if there is a breakdown in our trade, there's a war, something happens, we're in trouble. You know what I recall? I recall that the average human being can't survive without 6 to 7 minutes worth of oxygen, anywhere from 3 to 5 days without water, and approximately 16 to 30 days without food. Do you see how fragile our world is? So going back to December 24th, 1914, humanity had a spark waking up where these people stopped and they realized that they were human and they saw the humanity in people who had different experiences with them. And if that had actually gone throughout the entire Western Front, the First World War would have ended. And could you imagine what the world would be now without that devastation that happened with the First World War, followed by the Second World War, followed by the Cold War? These are just thoughts. You're going to ask me, why do I bring this up? Why is this sitting on a business platform? Guess what? Your business only exists because we are having peace. If we do not have peace, we do not have trade, we don't have business, and we will fall back into becoming deindustrialized, and worse, we might become cannibals. That's right. You guys ever heard of Easter Island? It's called Easter Island because Captain Cook discovered it in the 1700s on Easter Sunday. And you know what they discovered? They discovered there were about 1,200 people living on Easter Island. And they looked around and saw these statues. And they looked around and they said there must have been a more advanced society, because to have that extra time and labor to be able to build those huge statues that you see on Easter Island, you must have a sophisticated society. So what occurred was, they're figuring around like 530, approximately a few boats from Polynesia came to the island, and they had surplus. It was a very rich island. But around 850, they saw that the environment was overstretched. And around 1500, the entire society collapsed. And they knew this because they were able to see that the deep water fish they were not able to find anymore, and there was no trees anymore. So they turned to the only meat source, food source left on the island, and they turned clannish. They became cannibals. They turned to each other. They're figuring the population got to over 10,000 people on the island. Again, when they arrived there on Easter Sunday in the 1700s, they only found 1,200. That's a model for the earth. Where are we going to go? We need each other. Who's going to make those decisions? If you are an entrepreneur, you know that you've made decisions that have made your life. Do not abdicate your responsibilities to your family and your community. Continue to question and then act. And together, when we say no, everything changes. Every tyranny ends when good people say, I will not acquiesce to evil. Have a wonderful day, and we'll chat soon.